meaning of the legal terms. So these are basics. We are not saying go and study law, but we are saying at least know what it means when we are saying there is a suspect. So when we are talking about a suspect, this is a person who has not yet been charged. So this is a level where we are still at the police. So they are referred to as suspects. They have not been charged, they are not guilty. When we start talking about them being referred to as accused person, it means they are now in court, but they are not yet convicted. They have been charged in court. So you have to understand that before you even start reporting. Then after going through the court processes, at the end of the trial, for example, that's when we then talk about being convicted or not guilty or acquitted. So those are basics, terminologies that you ought to know, you ought to understand as journalists before you start reporting to the public, because we refer to the public as laymen. They would not understand these terms. So it's up to the media to make sure that they simplify and unpack it in an accurate manner. I hope I've addressed it well.
Yes, you have, and you've also brought up some of the jargon that some people may not understand, being convicted, being acquitted, and you're mentioning that the general public may not actually understand what that is. So are there any resources available or any training sessions that journalists could actually learn to make sure that they strike that balance of, reporting accurately but without distorting important information?
True. Yeah, I'm glad you invited me here in my capacity as the Vice President of the Law Society of Zimbabwe. And as the Law Society of Zimbabwe, you know that we also take it so serious when we read news that is coming from the media, especially when it pertains to court rulings, court judgments. So in many cases, we have read misleading headlines. And we are very much worried when we see such. So we therefore encourage journalists to approach us, to approach the Law Society and request probably for trainings. We can organize that probably for a fee or even for free, depending on the circumstances. But I know if you approach the Law Society formally, requesting such trainings, especially on interpreting some of the terms that are normally used in court that you usually report on. So we may have a partnership deal, or we may have an MOU written, signed and agreed on your principles and us, and work out something. But also, most importantly, when we hold our events, we have a number of events that we hold. So we encourage you journalists to come along, be part of the event, listen through, get to understand how we handle how we work as lawyers in general. So those are platforms that are open for you as journalists. The tricky part is, as Law Society, it's very difficult for us to come to you first, because we already have a mandate as Law Society of Zimbabwe to regulate all lawyers in Zimbabwe and to represent them. Mm-hmm. But then we are also worried about the public, because in that realm of representing and regulating, mm-hmm. we also take seriously the public, because our members, who are the lawyers, they represent the public. So the public, they already have the constitutional rights, as we have already stated. So in all doing that we are partners, we are great partners in making sure that we boost the public confidence insofar as the rule of law is concerned.
I see. Now, Rachel, let's talk about high-profile cases that usually attract intense media attention. And we want to look at, so the Constitution guarantees both freedom of expression and the public's right to access information, but at the same time safeguarding the rights of accused persons, including the right to a fair trial. Where, in your view, should the line be drawn between the public's right to know what's happening and then the accused person's constitutional right?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So we have already stated the principles that are in the Constitution insofar as the freedom of media, the freedom to access information, but that has to be balanced with the right to a fair hearing, as I've already stated. So while the media or the journalists are reporting on events that are happening in the courts, they must make sure that they understand that they cannot make certain pronunciations, if I may put it that way, because they may border along the infringing the right to a fair hearing. For example, there are some journalists who may actually report as if the accused person is already found guilty when they are not yet. And I like the fact that our constitution is democratic in that it allows openness, freedom, openness, and in that court hearings may be publicized. I'm saying maybe because it's not always the case. There are some instances where a balance is to be struck, whether this particular court case is supposed to be broadcasted or not. This involves maybe sensitivity of the matter, issues of state security and so forth. But while there is that right wherein the public has been given access to a court proceeding, as it has always done, there is that balance wherein, as journalists, you also need to understand what exactly is happening in the court. What does it mean if the court has dismissed a case? What does it mean if there is what we call a discharge at the close of a state case? Does it mean the case has already been dismissed, or does it mean it's still going on but there was an interim judgment that was made? So you need to understand that while we are proceeding in court, there are certain stages in a court trial, for example, wherein there may be an interim judgment made. So as a journalist, you must understand that this judgment that has been entered is not a final judgment. It's an interim. This matter is still going on. So in your report, you must then understand that we are still proceeding, but in this case, this other party applied for an interim order in terms of this, that, and the court granted it or dismissed it. So the court may dismiss an interim order, but it doesn't mean it has dismissed the entire court process.
I see.
So that is very important. So yeah, there should be a balance between the accused person and how you intend to report. And I must hasten to say that we have recently noticed the way journalists are too quick to report. I think there's a stampede of wanting to be the first
one to
get the headline.
Okay.
But in so doing, you might end up infringing the right of the accused person. So you must draw the line. You must firstly understand, before you start writing, understand whatever you want to write, is it the proper reporting? Am I not stepping into the right of the accused person? Because you also run a risk of being sued as a journalist. So it's very important that you know all that.
I see. Okay, so adding on to that, obviously, which is just showing that most journalists are struggling to fully understand the laws and procedure rules that govern the court proceedings, and that often exposes them to, the risk of being sued, like what you said, or contempt of court even. So what are the other common mistakes that media practitioners are making that you'd say, okay, this is another thing that needs to be addressed, something that needs to be stopped, or something we could do better when reporting on ongoing cases?
Okay, so firstly, journalists must understand that law in itself is technical. The legal language is technical. And it being technical, there are professionals like us, lawyers, who are trained to interpret it and to unpack it for the public. So as journalists, you are not spared. That technicality in law, it affects you. So the moment you understand that this is a technical field, you therefore require a professional to at least assist you. So what I would encourage is to approach a lawyer, especially the lawyers that are a party to the proceedings. Usually there is always a lawyer representing the accused. There's always a prosecutor representing the state. So you have the right to approach them and ask questions before you report, or ask for documents that are already in the public domain, so that as you report, you at least report it verbatim, or you at least you can simplify it, but with the guidance from a professional. So I need to give a very good example in cases where I've stated journalists, they start reporting on matters and they start misinterpreting issues. It's very important that the principle it's a Roman Dutch common law principle of sub judice. So already sub judice is not English. It's a technical language. It's a Dutch probably. So what we mean by sub judice, we mean the matter is still pending. And when a matter is still pending, you cannot report on its merit. You cannot speculate its outcome. You cannot write about its outcome as if it has already been decided. So already you are stepping into the rights of the accused person, and you run a risk of being sued. So it is important that you understand that law is technical, and the legal language is very much so technical. So you have to know it. You have to understand it. And the only way that you can do that is to talk to the professionals. Approach the lawyer that is handling the matter. Ask them. Request an interview.
To understand what everything means.
I'm sure they will. They should. And they ought to do that also in the interest of their clients. But then the problem is journalists, they are rushing into writing a story right away. And at the end of the day, there's a call for retraction and so forth.
I see.
Which can be avoided.
I see. Yeah. Well, thank you, Rachel, for sharing that with us and just pointing out some of the things that could get a journalist in trouble when they misreport something, and something that can potentially affect even the public and the person who's actually going through the court process. Hey, well, we're just going to take a short break. Stay tuned to Fourth Estate. We are examining the media's role when it comes to court reporting.
Didn't graduate? I guess I blew it.
You couldn't advise him anything. He would just look at you and say, so who do you think you are?
We were just really spoiled.
And then they just give me the receipt and I'd pay.
The guy walks in one day and then he says that he wants to make a movie.
He was blowing the money.
There was just this habit that he had where as soon as he got money, it was gone.
I just didn't have the skills or the experience.
This money, I could see it disappear so fast.
Welcome back. You are still watching Fourth Estate with me, Wadzanai Sansole. Now, we were saying earlier on before the break how a lot of the public's perception of court proceedings is usually shaped by either what they read or see or hear in the media, and also, interestingly, what they see in movies and series and things like that. But it is a serious issue that has to be taken with utmost importance when it comes to the choice in language used for reporting and all the training that's needed for journalists that do report on that in terms of court reporting. And I'm having a conversation with Rachel here, and you were just pointing out some of the mistakes that journalists often make that sometimes get them in trouble. And given that many journalism graduates get little to no specialized training when it comes to court things and everything that they need to know around that, how crucial are workshops in ensuring responsible and legally sound coverage of the justice system?
Thank you, Wadzanai. It is very, very crucial, like I have already stated. I think within the media institution, I'm sure through the Zimbabwe Media Commission or any other institutions that are within the media, something can be done, or it's already happening probably, But it is very important to periodically hold such trainings for journalists, wherein you can actually pay a lawyer, for example, not necessarily coming to the Law Society. You can actually approach any lawyer who is specialized in a particular field. So let me also point out that law is a specialized area. Not every lawyer is practicing criminal law. Not every lawyer is practicing labor law. So we are specialized. We have our own strengths. So it depends on what particular area that you want to focus on. You must be able to then invite a lawyer who is specialized in that field. How are you going to know that a particular lawyer is specialized in that particular field? That's where we come in as Law Society of Zimbabwe. We have the database for all our members. We know who is doing what. We know who is practicing what. So we can actually assist in that. We can provide you with a list of names of lawyers that are specifically handling labor laws, for example. So when you're having probably a training on labor laws, how to report on labor disputes, you are better placed when you have a lawyer who specializes to take you through the simplified version or processes of how the courts operate, how they interpret, and even how to interpret a judgment. For example, let's say there is a landmark judgment that has come out. Before you unpack it to the public, it's important to approach a specialized lawyer to simplify the judgment, because in other cases, many cases, we have seen headlines that are speaking to a landmark ruling when it is not even so. But because you are excited about headlines, you think, you know what, I've grabbed it, I'm going to break it first. But it's important to have those type of trainings, either through us Law Society or just approaching the specialized lawyers to assist.
Okay, would you say that legal literacy should be considered a core competency for court reporters rather than just an optional skill?
Certainly, Wadzanai. We expect that from the media. And like what I've said, our institutions, both the Law Society of Zimbabwe and the media, we are partners already, because at the end of the day, we have one common goal: to enhance confidence in the public, and also to uphold the rule of law, and also to have to let the public know that we have a justice system that is solid, that upholds the rule of law, and we have a very good constitution in this country that protects almost everyone when it comes to media freedom and fair trials and access to information. So it is very critical that as journalists, I think you also need to be specialized. Not every journalist must just jump and start reporting on legal matters. You must also have your own specialized journalists who do specifically with that. And I would even encourage such journalists to study law. It's never too late for that. So if they then study law, it's even much better. It covers you better, and you actually become a reliable source of information, and you will become trusted by the public. This is the goal at the end of the day, isn't it?
It is. Now, Rachel, there are some other sensitive issues that are also usually reported by the media. We look at categories involving minors, survivors of sexual offenses, domestic violence, and other vulnerable witnesses that carry like heightened legal and ethical obligations for the media. What are the key legal and ethical obligations for media practitioners when reporting on such issues?
Okay, that is very important, Wadzanai. So you gave a good example of reporting on minors. Those are highly sensitive parties in litigation. So already you must know that when you are reporting anything that pertains to a minor, you have to protect their identity. You have to protect the nitty-gritties of the matter. That's why even in an open court, you cannot have a trial that involves a minor be heard in open court. There is actually a procedure that is in place to protect such. So once you know that you are reporting on an area that is already protected by the Constitution, So you have to know your parameters. And if you happen to then breach that law, that is actually a crime that can lead to a criminal charge being leveled against you, and you might end up facing charges and so forth. So as a journalist, imagine all you are doing is you think you are doing your job, but in so doing you have already committed a crime. So it's important to know the sensitivity of some cases. But also, again, with the coming in of the cyber and data protection laws that are in place, you ought to know that when you are reporting, you have to protect the identities of the parties. And it's now a law in this country. So you have to know that. You cannot just publish someone's address just because you want to report, just because you are saying, you know what, we have media freedom. No, it does not work like that. You now have to know the principles, especially the data and cyber protection laws that are already in place. So as journalists, we expect you to know. And you must also understand that ignorance of the law is not a defense. So you can't then say, I didn't know. You will not say that in court and win. So we expect you to know that. And how do you know that? Approach professionals, get trainings, and make sure that you are also specialized in your field.
And then talking about these data and cyber protection laws, Rachel, and looking at how we're living in the digital era, where a journalist can even be sending messages on WhatsApp there while they're in the courtroom, giving updates real time, or tweeting what is happening, probably even before the verdict and then even afterwards. Do these current legal frameworks adequately address this new media reality?
That's a very good question. I must say that when certain laws were crafted, they were crafted before the coming in of the issues like the cyber and data protection laws. So I feel like much is needed to be done in making sure that the ethical requirements and even reviewing of the existing laws to protect and cover issues of live streaming, issues of real-time reporting, so that you are also acquainted with what you are expected of. But I feel like there's a gap, and much can be done through the various institutions that are involved in the media. So yeah, there is a gap. I can't really pinpoint step by step, but I can actually I know I've noticed that there is still a gap. And there's certain reporting that is happening, and nothing is done because there's no law yet that can bring to book such culprits. So there's need to look into that in light with the emerging trends that are coming up.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rachel, for coming through to Fourth Estate to share with our viewers what they need to know concerning this matter.
Thank you very much, Zanai, for having me.
Great. Well, we've come to the end of our program. We were looking at the role of the media when it comes to court processes and court reporting. And we're just having a conversation with Rachel Chibaya, the Vice President from the Law Society of Zimbabwe. I've been your host, Wadzanai Sansole. Pleasant viewing.